This episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast is brought to you by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com, and also the Google Workspace for Therapists course. Again, you can find that at practiceoftherapy.com/G Suite course. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 172 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer. Hope you're having a good week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. As I'm recording this, or as this particular episode is coming out, it's going to be right at the end of the Easter weekend or Passover weekend, whichever tradition you're from. Or I know there are some people out there that aren't necessarily religious, but I happen to be one that is religious, and so Easter weekend is a big weekend for us. So, but anyway, however you spent the previous weekend, I hope it was a good one. I was also this morning as I was walking, I was just kind of doing my kind of morning routine of prayer and meditation and all of that, and just really thinking about, where we were this time last year. Much different now than it was. I know that the COVID pandemic really kind of started. We started really locking down in March, and I know by April everything was very much shut down. And so I look back at where we were last year and how scary it was, but we've kind of moved out of that, hopefully. And I also want to say, I realize that over this past year, there are some of you that are listeners to this that have been greatly affected by the COVID pandemic. And I know there's probably some of you that have lost loved ones. And so again, my hearts and prayers and sympathy go out to you, having gone through this terrible season we went through last year. But anyway, I'm feeling pretty hopeful. I've received both vaccines, and the majority of my circle of friends and folks that I hang out with have gotten vaccinated. And so feeling hopeful, and we're able to get together more often and that sort of thing. I realize that we're not quite out of the woods, and that there's still a lot of people that haven't been vaccinated, and we've not really reached that herd immunity. But anyway, I'm feeling hopeful. I'm looking forward to the summertime. It looks like spring here. It doesn't feel like it weather-wise. Still really cold. Hopefully this is the last cold snap we'll have. But the trees are budding, and the jonquils or daffodils are coming up, and the redbud trees are also known as the Lazarus trees by some, or I think there are a lot of different names, but they're pretty prolific in the South anyway. It's a purple tree, a purple bud that comes out on the trees, but they're referred to as red buds, even though they're purple. But anyway, I really, truly digress. But anyway, hope you're having a good start to spring. So anyway, I'm looking forward to you hearing from my guest today, Marisol Westberg. And she and I have a conversation just about the importance of having a niche, but also just her, she's in an interesting niche in that we know about it, but there are not too many of them out there. But she's a certified sex therapist, and so we talk about that. And so anyway, it was a great conversation, and she's built a wonderful practice, and she's really taken advantage of some interesting things. She has now moved outside the country, or living outside the country, and just talks a little bit about some of the tax advantages of that, but being able to embrace just a fully online practice. So I'm looking forward to you listening in on my conversation with Marisol. But before we get to Marisol, one of the things I wanted to let you know about is during the month of April, I'm going to have a sale on my Money Matters for Private Practice course just for the month of April. And you can get to that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/money matters. And in this course, I partnered with my good friend Julie Harris from Green Oak Accounting, and we teach you all of the ins and outs of the financial side of private practice. It's not something that we learned in graduate school. I know it was a lot of the stuff was stuff I had to learn along the way, but one of the things that I think a lot of people find out when they go into practice is that the numbers, the knowing your numbers that you hear me talking about is something they have to learn. And so this course is designed to do that. It will take you through, hopefully in a way that doesn't cause your eyes to glaze over. It's just some simple accounting terms and bookkeeping and just learning how to use profit first within your practice. Also just learning how to read your numbers by looking at your profit and loss statements and that sort of thing. We also go into in the premium courses go into how to set up payroll and all of those kinds of things. And so anyway, for the month of April, you can get the course at 20% off. And so if you go to practiceoftherapy.com/money matters. And then when you use the coupon code or promo code, just April 2021, you can get 20% off on that course. So be sure and check it out, Money Matters in Private Practice. And if you go to that page too, you can get a free download. It's just a financial analysis guide that will walk you through the process of just thinking about your numbers and really looking at, where you want to be financially as far as what you want to bring in. And it just walks you through the process of figuring out how you get there. So anyway, be sure and check that out. practiceoftherapy.com/money matters. And also I want to invite you to go over and check out our sponsor for the podcast. And that is TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record system for private practices in the mental health field. And they're who I use in my practice. They have a patient portal that is second to none in being able to direct your patients or your clients to that portal. And they can set appointments, check your schedule. They can also fill out paperwork electronically. Also, there is a telehealth feature within the portal that you can use to meet with your clients all in one place. And also, I will say that their support is second to none. If you have a problem or need to figure something out, you can email them or call them and they will respond usually in just a very short time. So it's a wonderful, wonderful platform. I couldn't live without it in my practice. So be sure and check them out, therapynotes.com. And if you will use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, you can try them out for 2 months without any cost at all to you. Get them for 2 months for free. So be sure and check it out, therapynotes.com. So without further ado, I would love for you to listen to my conversation with Dr. Marisol Westberg. Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. And I'm so glad for you to get to know today Marisol Westberg. And so Marisol has really developed an interesting niche, and I think you're going to love hearing about this from her. But welcome, Marisol. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm glad we stumbled across each other, and glad you reached out for the podcast, because when I started looking at, as I said, kind of your story and seeing what you've been doing, I think people are going to find this pretty fascinating. So as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've landed where you've landed?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit unusual, because I always say that the sex therapy piece kind of landed on my lap rather than me looking for it. And it just started because I was teaching a course on sex therapy, and I never had done one case of sex therapy. So I said, I better get on this. And what was interesting is that as I was starting out my private practice too, but as soon as I started to focus on sex therapy because I had that need, my practice started to really flourish.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot more people contacting me. And so that I realized that creating that niche was really a way to grow my practice.
Yes, yes, and I can imagine that is one that is a niche that um, people would latch onto. I was just remembering, I'm licensed marriage and family therapist, and I remember in graduate school we just barely touched on the subject. I think it was kind of like we're gonna say something about it, but then we're gonna move on to something else. So there's probably a lot of stigma and shame and all that kind of stuff around that whole niche.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I think in when we're training or when we're going to school, they do teach us a very little amount on what they do with human sexuality. And
Mm-hmm.
I think most of the courses actually out there, whether it's in person or online on sex therapy, still continue to kind of like expand on the human sexuality piece, but they don't really focus on the therapeutic part. Like how do we get people to move through their issues? It's more about this is what it looks like, defining things,
Mm-hmm.
expanding your breadth of what you're comfortable with. And so a lot of behavioral, cognitive type of information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to learn it all on my own. All the books was not, they weren't enough. They didn't teach me much of anything. So yeah, I think what I do is a little bit more comprehensive.
Right, right. Well, I know one of the things that we were just chatting about a little bit before we started recording, when COVID hit, you really decided to go full on remote, and so tell folks a little bit about that, and because I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, well, I like the business side of things and I like to expand on different things. So when COVID hit and I saw that everything was going to Zoom, it just made business sense to me. I'm like, why am I paying rental? And I knew it was going to be here for a while. Am I going to continue to pay rent for a year or two? Am I going to continue to live in an expensive city?
Mm-hmm.
And why not just cut my costs and yeah, live on the beach?
All right, yeah, and yeah, and I think you had shared with me you're in the Dominican Republic, which would be an awesome place for me to be right now.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah,
So,
and it might be interesting for your listeners to know that if you do go out of the country, you save yourself from paying a lot of the income tax because
mhm,
your income is you're getting income in a different country. So
right.
I think it's $100,000 that you don't have to pay income taxes on.
Oh, wow.
About 100,000, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's a big motivator, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you have built your practice, I guess maybe tell us a little more about how you got interested in really developing sex therapy as a niche, um, and just how it developed for you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was something that I had to do because I had to teach a class on it. And then I started to read everything that was out there on sex therapy and start to incorporate some of the stuff that I had read because what we learn is very little in
Hmm.
our graduate school. But it wasn't working. It wasn't clicking for
Hmm.
me. It wasn't really moving the therapy forward. So I had to kind of like draw in from other places and kind of like start to mess around with all the different theories out there that we typically use like for couples therapy and integrate it into the sex therapy. And I actually developed my own model because there was nothing out there that could help me do this. And I call it the fuck sex model.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, that's great. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what, as you develop that, I know you've been putting together some courses and all of that. And so, yeah, has all of this evolved for you?
Right. So after I was, refining this model and practicing and practicing and practicing, I had all this knowledge And like I said, I like to do different things. So I said, and people were asking me too, and I was teaching it as well. So I decided to just put it in a video format. Just to have it there available for everybody, and not have to like teach a class over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to learn all there is to know about creating courses and videotaping and all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I do is I present that model as to everything you need to know as to how to do sex therapy in a comprehensive way, in an effective way.
Right, right. Yeah, so I'm curious, what are maybe some things that you've found that um, are maybe kind of some of the outside the box kind of ways of thinking about sex therapy that you're finding effective?
Well, there's two prongs to it. One of them is to know what to do with specific issues,
Mm-hmm.
and so that is definitely a part that you try to apply couples therapy without knowing exactly what to do with these issues wouldn't really work. But the other prong is my way of working with couples therapy or individual therapy is to look at different categories and the wounding in those categories, and then healing the wounding in those categories. So whether it be, and so I work with the behavioral, the cognitive, the emotional, the relational, and also the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of relational trauma as well when it comes to sex therapy. So a lot of trauma work, a lot of wounding work and healing. And so you do stuff like inner child work and parts work,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other, so that can come back. Then I found that there were, especially with low sexual desire, that is a place where people talk a lot about, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't seem like they can move the needle on that. It's very, very difficult piece in sex therapy to address
Mm-hmm.
low sexual desire. And it's because all the interventions that are presented out there are counter therapeutic. Actually, it creates more of the problem than the solution creates more of the problem, which the solution. So for example, with low sexual, do you want me to go into detail?
Yeah, sure. Because I was getting ready to ask. You've got my curiosity out. Yeah.
So for example, some people with low sexual desire say, well, you just got to push yourself more. You just got to find ways to increase your sexual desire. You just got to do it. There's one woman that just uses the Nike logo, just do it. But what happens is that they don't, the reality is that, well, this is mostly very gendered, by the way. It's mostly women, although it happens to men, but
Mm-hmm.
most of this is gendered in that way. So what they don't realize is that these women have been trying to do exactly that, pushing themselves and trying to do it and having sex when they don't want to. And so more of that is just more of the problem. And so I take a different approach, which is to realize that people that, women that are forcing themselves to have sex because that's, they want to make their partner happy. They want to be a sexual person. But if they keep on pushing themselves when they don't want to, then it creates a sort of like, a subtle violation,
Mm-hmm.
and that just creates some trauma around it. And it's just, as anything else, the more you don't want to go into that space, the more you won't go in there, and the more
Mm-hmm.
hurtful it is, the less you go in there. And the
Right.
reason that happens is because, people get together, they're having lots of sex. And then after a while, women's sexuality is very different than men's as far as today. I hope that changes. But their sexuality is affected by being tired, by having too much to do, by being stressed out. And so their sexuality starts to diminish. And that's okay. And most people, most partners are okay with that temporarily. But
Mm-hmm.
what happens if it becomes repeated, then that person starts to get upset. And that upsetness then leads to the person wanting to please them when they don't really feel like it.
Right.
And to make sure that they don't get upset or make sure that they won't withdraw or punish. And so that's an issue. So the approach of like pushing or trying to encourage more, let's find your sexuality, let's light some candles or do some yoga or stuff like that. None of that stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
Or sensitive focus is a big thing in sex therapy. I think every couples therapy kind of throws that out there, and it doesn't work because yes, let's slowly touch, but it's more of the same. Let's put you in this position where you have to force yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So does it, do you find that people that are struggling with low sexual desire, is it require more focus on individual work, or does it tend to be more couples?
Yeah, I would say 70% is the couples, is the relational dynamics, and maybe a 30% is individual dynamics. For example, sexual abuse or body issues, or yeah, those two things basically.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I would have guessed. So as you built your practice, what did you find was helpful in just marketing it and starting to get referrals? My hunch would be, and you can tell me if my hunch is correct or not, is that there are not too many people advertising as sex therapists. So when you do a search for it, those that are there tend to go to the top of the list.
Right. So I think a lot of people search for what they need, and so if you have an adolescent that's depressed, you're going to say therapy, adolescent depression, So whatever comes up and whoever is specializing in that, I would rather go to somebody that specializes if I had an adolescent that was depressed in that than going to a therapist that's just general, like right away I would feel that would increase my sense of confidence and trust in that person of their expertise. So the same thing happens with sex therapy. However, in the place, it's a little bit more than that because, for example, you could be in a place where there's lots of sex therapists, and where my practice is in Portland, Oregon, and I was teaching in a sex therapy program. There's tons of sex therapists, but then there are other places where they're not. So if you're competing with other therapists, you have to do a little bit more than just specialize in sex therapy. You definitely have to do some SEO. You definitely have to make sure you're on Google My Business on the maps. You have to make sure you're writing content and that your site is fast and that and all those things, and that you have links to your site, and all those things are going to increase your standing on Google. Or you can be in a place where, it takes a while to develop all these things, the SEO, and I don't know what you call the other things, but content marketing or that type of stuff.
Yeah. You're exactly right. It's really just having enough quality content on your website so that Google really pushes it towards the top of the list is really kind of the way, that I think about it, is you want to have, number one, good quality content, but also a lot of it. And so being able to put it up there.
And I think there are people that specialize in this. Like, for example, I saw a big shift, and I know all this stuff. I do all my own website design, everything. But once I hired somebody to do the actual SEO stuff, that really pulled me up. And I know, because I know that there are some people that just straight out of school haven't had a lot of time with their website, and they're like number 2 in the Google. And so I'm like, there's a little bit more than just, time and content. And there's something there that I don't know. And so why not hire somebody to figure that one out?
Right. Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Marisol, because I think on the business side of things with running a practice is really recognizing the point at which it's really more valuable for you to outsource rather than try to bootstrap your way through it. Yeah. And I know a lot of times people will try to do that to save some money, but you can really end up creating more problems for yourself than actually outsourcing it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do this stuff because I like it. And so anything that I'm not good at or I don't like, I go on Fiverr, and it's super easy, super, I think, worth the money. It's not expensive. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a good, you bring up a good point in terms of outsourcing resources, and we'll probably maybe put some links in the show notes on this. Is just a couple that come to mind are Fiverr and Upwork. Are two places that you can find people for specific jobs that you want to outsource. And typically they're more short term. So, yeah, I know that's been a valuable service for me. It's really how I found a quick shout out to Rachel, who does the podcast editing for me. That's how I found her. And so that's been really a great thing. So Marisol, tell folks more about the courses that you're offering and for those that want to get more training in sex therapy and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I have one master class sex therapy course, and it's actually accredited by the association, the Sex Therapy Association that everybody belongs to, for 12 credits. And I'm sure other people can find, in their CEUs, find it that all apply to whatever organization that they belong to. But the course just focuses on the model that I developed, and it goes through the most prevalent things that you'll see in sex therapy, how to treat it, and not in a different way that you're going to read out on, because that's what I had to develop. The stuff that was out there wasn't very effective for me, so I had to develop something else. And it's all video format, so you can take it at your own pace, and it's about 12 hours of work.
Wow. Yeah. So curious, what platform are you using for your courses?
LearnDash.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just starting out, so it's like you start and you hear other people using other stuff, but for now, LearnDash is okay for me. Yeah,
and that's an important piece, is being able to find what works for you. It's absolutely. So I want to be respectful of your time, Marisol, but what are some other things that you would want people to know just about how you've built your practice and the things that you think would be important for them to know?
Yeah, I actually developed a guide, like a 10-step, everything that I did to increase the amount of people that were contacting me. And so I have a whole bunch of information there. And some of it is stuff that people don't really talk about. I think my advice to everybody would be to talk personally with other people that have done it, because some of the information that you read on the internet it just misses some of this stuff.
Yeah. I think it's go ahead.
No, that sometimes it's maybe difficult to talk about in the web-like format.
Yeah, I think it's you're exactly right. I think it's one of the things that I think is important to do when you're thinking about growing or expanding your practice or whatever is finding resources and also mentors that can kind of walk you through the process, because there's a lot of people out there that are have done it before, and they can really kind of give some good guidance on those kinds of things. So
it's
totally
interesting.
agree.
I think we choose supervisors based on their knowledge of therapy, which is great, but also to think of choosing supervisors or mentors that are also very savvy when it comes to the business side of it.
Yeah. So, well, Marisol, as I said, I'd like to be respectful of your time. Tell folks a little bit about how they can get in touch with you and find out more about your courses.
Yeah, so I'm at garciawestberg.com. Hopefully you'll have a link to that. And,
yes.
And right there, everything's there.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll have this in the show notes, and so people can access it easily. So, well, thanks again for being on the podcast, and I'm hopefully maybe we'll have some more conversations in the future. Well, folks, I'm so glad you got to hear from Dr. Marisol Westberg. It's interesting that whenever I do interviews, how the conversation goes. We went from talking about niches to sex therapy to also the importance of outsourcing, all of those things. And I think it's just a reminder to all of us, just kind of the diversity of what it means to be in private practice and all the different things that we have to pay attention to. But anyway, be sure and check out Marisol's website, and there'll be links here in the show summary and the show notes. But it's GarciaWestberg.com, www.GarciaWestberg.com, and to learn more about her and what she's doing. And so she's got some great courses. I was checking those out. So be sure and check that out. Also, just as a reminder before we close, be sure and check out the Money Matters and Private Practice course. You can find that at practiceoftherapy.com/moneymatters. And during the month of April 2021, there'll be a 20% discount if you'll just use the promo code April 2021 when you check out. And that'll get you 20% off on the course, whichever version you pick. We've got a basic version, which just goes through the basics of the financial side of the practice, and then a premium version, which goes into more in depth, just particularly around payroll, and really get to hear from Julie Harris at Green Oak Accounting, her adding her expertise to the content of the course. And then also there's an option there for you to get some consulting along with your purchase of the course. So be sure and check that out. Again, all of that is at practiceoftherapy.com/moneymatters. And for the month of April, use the coupon code or promo code April 2021 and get 20% off whichever version of the course you pick. So anyway, and then also just as a reminder, be sure and check out our sponsor for the podcast, TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. They're the leading electronic health record system for private practices in the mental health field. They're who I use in my practice, and I can highly recommend them. And be sure and check them out and use the coupon code or the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can get 2 months of their services at no extra cost or no charge. So you can try them out for free for 2 months. It's really a great deal. So be sure and check it out. TherapyNotes.com. So that's another episode under the belt. And so again, thanks for joining me for the podcast. If you haven't done so already, be sure and subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. I think we're on most all the major podcatchers now, Amazon, and Audible, believe it or not. We're on Audible. They have a podcast part of that particular app. So be sure and subscribe and leave us a review. That's always great to get honest feedback from people about the podcast, and just lets us know what you think. So anyway, take care, folks, and we'll be back with you next week. Got a lot of great guests planned up ahead, and so I'm looking forward to you being with me on this journey. Take care, folks. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.